Well, today I'm getting to talk to Stephen Churn. He's a new friend I met through the Maker Fair, and he has an organization, IAMCOLLEGE, which you can find online, iamcollege.org, and also on Instagram.
We're a proponent for education, and there's different ways, pathways to success. So we push post-secondary education, but we also push entrepreneurship. We also push STEM and STEAM programming. We push mentorship and go into schools and have them look at you and say, oh, wow, you can do that, or you know how to do that. And you kind of create this whole new avenue. Well, if he can do it and he looks like me, then I can do it. And I feel like that's something that may be overlooked, but is very, very, very important. And even talking with adults that in various fields that wish they had more representation, it starts with the kids, it starts with the youth, and just showing them like this is an actual pathway. I know what's being shotgunned at you guys about what you should do or where you can go, but the opportunity range is a lot bigger than that.
Having to deal with youth in terms of leadership and wanting to educate and inspire. So can you tell me why that's important to you and how you got into that field?
So to answer your question, why it's important to me is because, I can think back to me being in school and some of the things that I wish I would have had more exposure to. And, they say be the person that you wish you had to help you out. What got me into just working with the youth period is kind of in my family. So my mother, she worked with DFACS and different family agencies. So I grew up around group homes and emergency shelters and things of that nature. And just growing up around that, you see a lot of, my family's just always been active like in church and just like community stuff. So you see that it becomes normal. And when I became 18 and went to, when I was in college and I became 18, I actually started getting paid to work with like group homes. I was doing it, unofficially, but just working with just different people, the youth, and it just stuck with me. So creating an organization that I could basically have a platform to give back on my terms and create programming and different things that I felt filled the gap. It was like, it felt like a natural transition for me.
And so I think when people have resources, they kind of don't really understand how direct of an impact it can make. So there's this autobiography by Evander Holyfield, where he talks about, he's an Atlanta guy and we're in Atlanta, so it makes sense, and how he went to the Boys and Girls Club and he was a football player until one guy taught him, oh, you could be a boxer, and that made him an Olympian and made him a champion. And so you can have that direct one-to-one introduce someone to something. Have you had those kind of experiences where you're maybe introduced someone to something that they never would have had before?
Definitely. And to be honest, man, that's one of my, I guess it's one of the experiences that keeps me doing it. It becomes a little addictive at a point because you can see the moment where your influence might have changed the direction or the course of their perception, or expanded it even so. It's a quote that basically says that, the biggest, these ships that go out to sea, the difference between them going to one continent or another is the smallest part of the ship, the rudder. If it turns one way, you're in a whole other side of the world. If it turns the other way, so being that rudder for them, that they could have had a course that they were taking, and because you exposed them to more and they I guess responded with it or resonated with a certain thing that they never seen before, you open up this whole new world of opportunity, and now it's the different direction. So I have quite a few experiences like that. When I worked, so I had an after-school program with the city of Atlanta, and it was for the teens program. And we were at a rec center called Anthony Flanagan, and one of the young men that I worked with there, we would do STEM programming. And, my whole thing is about exposure, getting them in front of something that they might not have ever seen in front of them, like in person. They hear about it, but to actually see it, to touch it, to play with it, and say, it's okay, man, you can explore it. But one day he was there, and some of the kids already left, and he told me, he was like, I wish you was my science teacher. And I was like, wow, why do you say that? And he was like, well, you're patient with me, and you showed me this, that, and the third. So, he's like, I just shut down in class because I don't ask questions because I feel like I'm frustrated. So, just like stuff like that. Or when they come back the next time and they've Googled and YouTubed like something that you didn't think they were paying attention to. So now they're telling you about it. So those moments are pretty often when you do something like this.
I love the nautical metaphor. So you were talking about the rudder steering a big ship.
Yeah.
There's the other part of that I think is interesting is that sometimes these really large ships, they're so big to maneuver. You know, a really large ship is hard to turn.
Yeah.
So they have these things that are called pilot ships sometimes, that they're the small ship that goes out first and sees like you'll pull them. If they're more maneuverable, they can see if there's something in the water.
Definitely.
And so like it's easy, and it could be kind of almost like insulting. Some people might think like, oh, you're saying you're better than the science teacher? No. It's that like you need both.
Yes.
Like it's a symbiotic relationship where there's going to be the daily tasks that are happening in the schools, and that can't be replaced. But there's also a need for what you could be as like that pilot ship, right?
Yeah, and I look at myself as I agree. I totally agree with you. That's invaluable, like that structure and that the teacher put in their time but I look at it as reinforcement, because a lot of times like what kids see in school, just like you said, your job, it's your job. You know what I mean? You put it in this box and you only open that box and play with the things in it or interact with the things in that box when you're there. Outside of it, it's your world. And it can be, but I kind of show it's like mutually exclusive, like the stuff that we do. It's still science, it's still STEM, it's still technology, it's still education, it's still entrepreneurship. Like all of this, I try to connect kind of build on the foundation that's already there. Right. And because I'm not in a classroom, or even when I go to a classroom, my approach is different, because, kids have a certain expectation for teachers. Mm-hmm. So by me being unorthodox in that regard with my presentation and teaching them things, it's like, oh, well, all of this is connected. Mm-hmm. And it gives them an idea of a bigger world. It's like, teachers even say it, like, you have no idea, like, outside of here what's really going to happen.
Right.
Because you're in this bubble. So engaging them in unconventional ways outside of, like, what they expect kind of, like, generates a bigger, awareness of, and it reinforces what the teacher already teaches them. So.
Right. And, and also it doesn't really get through to a kid till they hear something 5 times. So like, even if it's as simple as like 1 + 1 is 2, it's like they say you have to say 1 + 1 is 2, 1 + 1 is 2, and you can't even change the way you say it. Like you can't change your volume. So it's like you have to have this like redundancy, and so that the fact that you could maybe hear it from an outside source that's also trusted, like yourself.
Yeah.
That's
Definitely.
Both the information, you said STEM and STEAM things, but then also it could just be the ways in which you conduct yourself. I think one of the unique challenges, though, is you come in and you don't have a backlog of having so many months. So, like, how do you reconcile that? Like, how do you build relationships on the fly? How do you get them to respect you? How do you get them to not talk back? All those things.
All right, so those are realistic challenges or opportunities. And every opportunity is a pathway to building a bond. So one of the things that I do is just be genuine. I feel like the youth are excellent detectors of disgenuine people or people that they feel like have objectives. So just be genuine by being myself, and then kind of meet them where they are. Have a genuine interest in what they're doing, and then I connect it to the source material or the content that I'm bringing to them. So. Also, it doesn't hurt to wow them, like in the first 2 minutes, the first initial meeting, to wow them. So one of the things that I do is I constantly have to stay plugged in to some of the things that are popular, and just have to do research and things like that, and then pay attention to what they're doing. So one of the things when I go to a classroom, I usually do something. I say crazy, but something like dramatic with something that they already familiar with. So I take a cell phone and I say I hack the phone. I use one of their phones and I'll get into like the back end of the cell phone. Nothing damaging. I don't really teach them how to do it, but then I show them like, this is the cell phone that you use every day. This is the accelerometer in it. This is the IR sensor. And they see their smartphone, they see behind the scenes, that stuff they would never see, and it has them question everything else that they used to using. You know what I mean?
Right. So
that's one of the ways. So I do like shock and awe at first, and then I tie that in to something that they're already learning in a genuine way. and it usually works. As far as like talking back and anything like that, I found that certain modes or certain things supersede other things. So if they are genuinely interested, naturally they're not going to be talking, or they're going to try to get as much of it as they can. If it's something that they're not exposed to, or something that they're interested in, or something they've never seen before, you go to a movie, everybody's quiet in the movie for the most part until there's those points where, you know, interaction is acceptable. But you want to take it all in. So I usually don't have a lot of issues with discipline. And then if it does start to get like that, a lot of times their peers will get them on track. Like, listen, I'm trying to learn this, shut up. and that usually is like easy lifting for me.
Sure. And you also mentioned in the middle of that it's about being yourself.
Yeah.
And you can interpret that two ways, I think. One is be authentic, so just be honest.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, be yourself, is that your authentic self has an experience that is applicable to them. So you, like, your organization is called IAMCOLLEGE. You went to college.
Yeah.
You went to school in the state of Georgia at Albany State University.
Yeah.
So, like, do you feel like that is part of it? That it's like, I'm like you, but I'm like one step ahead in the journey, and you can share that experience.
Yeah. So I do agree that is a part of it. That having them be able to connect and relate to you at some degree is huge. I think another thing too is that I'm genuinely like excited about the stuff that I present to them. You know what I mean? Like technology, STEM, entrepreneurship, education. Like if I like so, and there's no dig against the teachers or anything like that, but to a degree that we're aware that, you know, that chef in the kitchen, he's there, but that's his job. You know. So to me, like that passion of like, I find it cool, let me share this cool thing with you, generally hooks them.
Yeah.
Another, and like I said too, like you said, the step ahead, that has to do with representation. So I try to be the guy that I wish I saw when I was their age.
Sure.
That was doing cool stuff, and that's when the questions come in. Like, how are you able to do that? You went to school for that, or how did you learn that, or what do you know? Because they're trying to figure out, how do what path do I get to do something cool like this? You know, and that's one of the things. So yeah, definitely.
I want to dig into something you talked about, because you were talking about like you find it fun. So when you talk about you find it fun, we're talking about like STEM and STEAM activities, and to be really dramatic about it, we're almost like in somewhat of a cultural revolution, because one generation ago those terms didn't exist. That wasn't in school. A generation before that, if you were talking about outreach and helping kids, it would all be about like kind of seminary or like Christian athletes, like. And so we're now in a standpoint where you're talking about like being kind of like Mr. Wizard, like that you see on TV, where it's like, I'm going to show you, this is something how your computer works. We can make drones, we can make robots.
Exactly.
So it's like, can you talk about that? How you're on the forefront of that kind of like STEAM revolution?
So and I agree with you. Now we have esports. We have all these different things that, to a degree, they existed before, but the focus wasn't on them, and it wasn't.
The infrastructure is growing.
The infrastructure is growing, and it wasn't attention. It wasn't people pushed towards those things, and on different levels. So me being excited to do certain things, and me being on the forefront, that's how I'm able to do it. Like I get excited. Like I love new things, and I learn about it so I can teach it to them. And so we were doing, and this is one of the things, when I first started my program that I do after school it's called STEAMship. You know, STEM, science, technology, and then engineering and math, art for STEAM, and the ship part was entrepreneurship and leadership. So we was combining all those different elements. And one of the things that I would do early was we do slime. And that's before slime became super popular. That's I always like, before it became popular, before they started selling the kits in Office Depot and Walmart, I looked it up, but I presented it to them in a way to where, are we going to put an entrepreneur twist on it? So this is the recipe for slime. You make it however you want. And I want you to sell me a product with this being the base. And I presented them in a different way. So just being something that they haven't seen before and presented in a way they haven't seen before. So now when slime became popular, the kids that went through my program, like, oh, we're on the next thing. You know, everybody, especially when you're young, when your kid's trying to be on the next thing. Okay. So lighting that fire, they'll follow it all the way until, just different elements, like different levels of STEM. So yeah.
And I think I don't want to like put too much on you, but there's a little bit of almost like that's the difference that you bring to the table, because you're talking about the slime activity. You mix these chemicals and they make a new product, product they could, basically a toy. So like you said, like back in the 50s they had like mule team borax, and there was like you make your own bouncy ball. Yeah. But what's interesting is that so like in science class they teach you your intro to physics. Speed is one thing, velocity is speed with a direction, and that's what you're doing. So it's like not just the product, but like that to sell the product, not just like it's not just a toy. Is that something that all your lessons are like that, or that you try to like say like, okay, this is one application, what are the other options, like if this exists? Definitely.
So one of the first lessons that I kind of share with them is intervention and innovation. You know, and I empower them to be inspired and use their imagination. And one of the talks that I give is that, you know, I'm an adult, like I'm older than you guys. So as we get older, it's my opinion that our imagination tends to shrink because of responsibilities, and we learn more of the world, the real world. They are unabridged by that. They don't have any bills or any, you know, so they can dream up solutions that we wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like we wouldn't even be able to conceive, because that's not real, or that's not possible. And adding that level of, I guess, freedom to them, and saying like, oh, this is something that we're going to do, but we're going to add a new element to it. So what can you create out of this? And kind of putting the keys in their hand could take something as simple and something as mundane and make it a whole nother thing. Because the ideas that I've received from that are like really like, wow, like, you know what, that could actually be a thing. Like, like I need to contact your parents. Like, but just giving them the license to take something, whatever activity we do, and just twist it. So that's how I feel like I've been successful, because I always look for an avenue that's not being touched yet, or not, you know, like, and giving another example, during the summer camp, because we wanted to put an entrepreneur twist on it, teach them how to create their own opportunities, essentially, utilizing their abilities and the resources that they have available. And I taught them how to make natural weed killer, household products. And we then put an entrepreneurial spin on it, and was like, all right, so here's the recipe. You can tweak it how you want. We're gonna go outside this rec center and spray various weeds. We're gonna mark them with your company, your company colors. And then afterwards, you have to sell me a package, or sell me on what you know, your results and what you provide. And that opens up a whole another avenue, you know, versus teaching them something and then letting them go. I kind of taught them something and then put it in the constraints of, like, so now create something for yourself out of it. Right. Does that make sense?
And that's a positive for the child. Yeah. But I want to advocate for you and ask you, like, that must be a lot of pressure and a lot of work. So like the stereotype is that like if you had a bad math teacher in 5th grade, it's like her lesson plan for this year is going to be the same as the last 20 years, and you just change the order of the questions, right? Yes. But for you don't have that option. It's like, you know, it's like slime worked good this year. Yes. It might not have any sort of relevance the next year, or even months. That it's like, have you had like a lot of turnover, or have you had issues like trying to like lesson plan in that way?
No. So yes, to a degree. So you do have to keep it fresh. And it's always elements that work, and it's always elements that you can take off. But the first thing I do is I kind of learn the audience. So I don't apply that, you know, all the kids are the same. We do exercises to kind of get me familiar, and get them familiar with me as well, and to kind of build this understanding. All right. So this is where your interests are, and you know, and we do this. You know, we try not to do. We have surveys and stuff like that, but we do this in an organic way. We do it in a fun way, like a game or something, to where they don't even realize that I'm collecting that information. And then based off of that, I can pull from the repository of different activities. All right, so slime isn't really cool this year, but they are interested in rubber bands or making wallets out of duct tape, so what is a version of that? The same elements from that lesson. Let's just replace some of the things with something new. So the structure remains kind of the same, but I just update it based on what I learned from them to kind of hone it in. And you always have to be in a state of seeing what they respond to well and what they don't. So I have worked multiple centers for after school program, and not just the kids, but the center might not have access to a computer lab. So being flexible with the same goal in mind has been tremendously helpful, and they respond to it very well because they know that the computer lab doesn't work. So me trying to come in with all these things that would require a computer would just be a dead on arrival. So I have to figure out, okay, well, I need you guys to learn something. So what can we do in the space with the interest that you guys have?
Now, this is going to be more of a put you on the spot kind of controversial question. Right? So one of the ways that I felt like I bonded with you is that like I felt like I've been in a similar kind of track, and at least for me, I'll say from my opinion, within the art world, there's this model where like they would have these kind of like art teachers kind of come in on a part-time basis, whereas it used to be like you don't have like an art teacher in some schools now. Like that's the first thing chopped. And so it's good when it happens, but it's also you might have an opinion of like, I really wish there was like a version of this that was just state sponsored, or that it was more regular. Like, do you have a vision? Like, do you feel like you like your autonomy, or do you kind of think like you're addressing a need that like a kinder society would have just like taken care of on its own, or like do you have that kind of like feeling?
Yeah, so I do. I feel like the way that I operate now, it's some plus, it's benefits and some detriments. But I'm able to address things in a way that teacher, and I hate to say it like
you have
that.
More autonomy.
Yeah, I have more autonomy, so I'm able to exactly. But if I do wish certain things were standardized, I do wish things were funded where it was normal to where they would have certain lessons or certain classes done in a certain way. To kind of prepare them for what I feel like I didn't receive, or what I didn't feel like was available. And of course it changes. Like, don't teach cursive anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's things that are attached to it that we don't realize that are attached to it. So when you were like removing the art teacher, that is a whole element that's gone, and that relies to creativity, relies to innovation. All these different things are removed. So I do agree with you. The autonomy that I have is beneficial, but I would love to see it in school. I would love to see it already a part of the structure. And that way, like, I feel like I'm the guy that kind of can come around and say, all right, well, you only touched on that a little bit, let me just focus on that.
Right.
And just to expand that, I do feel like everyone that's involved should have that, okay, well, Sean is covering this, and he can't really focus on that, but I'll take that, and we're all going in the same direction, hopefully. Yeah.
Well, you used this phrase, and I'll quote you on it, that you felt like sometimes you're running scared towards the thing that's scary.
Yeah.
I didn't say that in a very poetic way, but basically, like, you could say that about like STEM and STEAM. You could even say that about like the fact of like going into schools, like going into classrooms blind in a sense, like I'm just gonna, I have to deliver on the spot. Like, do you, like, can you expand on that? That what is that feeling of running scared? And
so the thing that we are most concerned about or most afraid of, and in the context of working with students, going to schools and providing programming, is that will it work, and what will the benefits be, and then will I connect with this youth? Will they get out of it what I'm trying to put into it? And I think a lot of times, sometimes it becomes very easy to just stick to what is already written down, to stick to whether it works or not. I stuck to this plan that was provided for me, or I provided myself. And on paper, this is what they would get if they followed this plan that I followed. When I say running scared towards things, doing the hard thing, doing the thing that makes you potentially uncomfortable. Like, some people have a fear of speaking, especially to kids. Some people have a fear of going into new. So I get to go into new environments with youth and kids, people that I haven't met before. And then in that time that I spend with them, they feel good, they feel like they learn, and then they want me to come back. You know what I mean? So to me, it's at this point, it's like it's scary, but I know whenever I feel this level of, I don't want to say scary, but it's concern. Whenever I feel this level of apprehension or nervousness, I know that after that comes this euphoric feeling of, we all learned, we bonded today, I taught you something new, you taught me something new, let's keep this synergy going. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think people can be, because working with, and I've met other vendors and other people with programs. It can be a daunting thing to go, because you're out of school. Like we're no longer those people. We're no longer, so it can be a daunting thing to go to them, and they can just say, because they are brutally honest. Like youth are brutally honest. They're respectful to a degree, but they're brutally. If you provide no value to them, they will express it in various ways, and you have to. And you've been to even just my Dart Day. You have to command their attention,
Sure.
And then once you have it, you have to present something to show that I'm worthy of you learning more from me.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing in itself.
Yeah. So like you mentioned in passing how cursive used to be in schools, and then it's went by the wayside. And so interestingly, I think the old way of thinking was, okay, cursive's out, but now the same cursive teacher maybe they can teach you typing. There'll be a typing class. But even more scary, if you want to use that word, is that like within one generation, we don't even need typing classes, because everyone's so fluent typing that typing isn't even the new cursive anymore. So like I think obviously like the through line is that it's like you have to teach communication and problem solving, which is kind of like what you talk about, like that, like whether it be like entrepreneurship, like how to sell the weed killer, or just being able to communicate like why you would want to buy the weed killer. It doesn't necessarily have to be sales. It's just about like communication skills, right? Definitely.
So somebody once said, and I'm not sure who, but your parents are preparing you for a world that won't exist when you get to it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And to a degree, school does that. And it's again, but realizing, like you said, cursive, like you're being taught this thing that by the time you get to the real world may or may not be beneficial to you.
Right.
But it took your time and your energy at that age to learn it.
Right.
Where it could have been replaced with something else. So I do focus, and you're right, I do focus on mindsets, and I do focus on problem solving and communication, and being able to articulate your thoughts and to identify problems and identify opportunities. And entrepreneurship is a great vehicle for that. And then now that you have the problem, now that you have now let's create the solution. What do you have around you to do that? You know what I mean?
Right.
And the more education you receive in certain areas, the more you're able to identify those things and those tools. So one of the vehicles that I use is competition, right? So I'll present a project and a concept. We talk about aerodynamics or something physics based, the chemicals, like you said, and I tell what each part does. Then I leave it to them to now you have another team that you have to beat. This is the objective. So that competition will motivate them to think and to solve that problem and to work that problem, and because all they know is that they want to beat that other team. And I fan it up, like I make it like something serious, and that pushes them to go beyond the A, B, and C I taught them, and to find different ways to kind of. So I believe that cookie cutter is all right, but that ability to think outside the box and to be resourceful is something that needs to be hammered in, because regardless of what exists after you, when you get to the real world that you didn't learn, you will always need to be able to communicate effectively. You will always be able to problem solve and be resourceful. Those are things that if I have to, read the study guide and read this book and just regurgitate information, whether I learn it or not, I can remember it. That I feel like it'd be a lot more useful. Right. So that's why I kind of center everything around. I teach you something cool, but then I teach you ways to get it or ways to figure it out for yourself when confronted with something that you do not know. And then we've had conversations about why you're in school. Like okay, yeah, what you learn, the quadratic formula, like what you learn is not necessarily, you might not necessarily use that, But what you will use is learning new information that you may or may not care about and applying it effectively. You know, if people go to jobs where they can care less about, you know, selling this widget or creating this or doing whatever task they have, but they do need to learn it and they do need to do it effectively. So that practice in school is important. So when I get a kid that says, "Why I even need to learn this?" It's not what you're learning so much as that you're learning, and you're learning how you learn. Mm-hmm. All right, so
and like I want your opinion on this. Yeah. It's a slight variation on that theme. So like I was watching on YouTube, they have all sorts of lectures, like college lectures, and one of them they had was Quentin Tarantino was speaking to young filmmakers, and he had this interesting kind of pull quote where he was saying like the biggest thing he learned from other directors was what he didn't need to know. Meaning that he had this fear of like, oh, I can't be a director yet because I don't know how to. If I wanted to make something look like the 60s, I wouldn't know how to make the room look like the 60s. I wouldn't know how to make their hair look like they were from the 60s. And other directors, Terry Gilliam and his other mentors in that capacity of who he met, basically told him like, it's not your job to do that. It's your job to be the director. So maybe the job of that task is to find the person who can do that, and that's a better use of their time, and it's a better use of your time, and you'll make a better product. And so like that's a kind of interesting thing to learn. Not just learning to learn, but also learning what not to learn, or what how to problem solve beyond just you know, I'll hit the textbook or I'll hit, you know,
exactly. And so you appreciate this. I'm not sure who said it. I can't think of right now who said it. But when it comes to a famous sculpture, you'll probably pick it up. You know, a block of marble, and it's like, how do you create this? And he's like, I just carve away. I see the thing that I want to sculpt, and I carve away everything else that's not that. And then at the end, I have it. So instead of trying to create, you know, and that's a part of like being self-aware and identifying. Like like you said, like I might not know specifically how to do that, but if I'm resourceful, I can. And another thing too, building confidence in their own abilities is huge with me. You know, it's show them something new, and then watch how they give them space to try it out, give them space to mess up, and then succeed, and then see that dividend of confidence, or that I didn't know I can build a drone. I didn't know that I could take this. And then some of it is like I'll have an old laptop, and I say, listen, I need a hard drive out of it, and I need the screen out of it. Here are the tools, have at it. And then reward them after they've successfully done it. You know, it builds that confidence. So then when they are confronted with something that they, like you said, then I don't know how to make the hair or whatever for the 1960s to get this look. Well, the last time I didn't know, I felt this way, I relied on myself, and I used my resourcefulness, and I used my creativity, and then I completed it. So I just do this. I'll use that same formula again. You know, that is key too. So yeah, I do feel like that is one of the things that I love to instill in some of the things that we do. Well, in everything that we do.
Can you think of any like specific examples of students you worked with where like you presented a large problem or of something to solve, and they solved it in ways that you didn't expect, or like
definitely examples of that? So few, and the recent one is Kendesi in Old Fourth Ward. I went to Miss Graham's class, and she was talking about identify toxins and pollutants, and then come up with a out of the box solution that you haven't seen done with things that already exist. You can use them. It just has to make sense in some kind of way, right? And tremendous ideas, and it surprised me because you get a sense of how they see the world. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And it makes sense. And my adult brain immediately starts thinking about you hear certain ideas, you're like, okay, that I'm not sure if that would work. But everything from utilizing buildings that are already there and wind comes through the city, so if we can attach some kind of filter or filtration system on buildings where wind passes through these tall buildings anyway, it would filter the air in the city, or just different things with cars. It was amazing. So you get that a lot because I feel that youth, children, students, they are still learning the world to a degree. I often get situations where they do come up with like things that I didn't expect.
Yeah, so like I would use the example of, so like if you're used to your height, like you stop growing at a certain height, and you might your daughter or friend or wife or whoever, they're a different height, and so like for me, I'll often be with someone else where it's like I can't see the prices on the bottom rack because like my line of sight literally cannot see it, and they might not be able to see into the next aisle because they physically cannot see over the top of the rack, and by just these height things, the most fundamental thing, you're having a different view of what's possible or what's around, and I think that's a very like common thing with kids, and it's like it's almost like that it renews you in your own perspective. It's like, oh yeah, I would never have thought like, oh, that building I just think of as a landmark. You think like, oh, we could do this with it.
Definitely.
And that's actually cool because I think of it being even especially kind of like Atlanta in a way.
Yes.
Because like there's a lot of renewal in Atlanta. There's a lot of growth in Atlanta right now. And so you're seeing lots of like neighborhoods, buildings being repurposed, people reinvesting both in material ways and in like their cultural ways. Yeah.
And they, I'll say this too, and they are always observing, always taking in, especially with social media now and all the different avenues that are aimed at them. So they become these repositories of all of this imagery, all of this information, and once you start connecting the dots, you give it start making things make sense to them, then all these ideas start generating, especially if you give them a task. So the biggest thing is empowering them not just to believe in themselves, but to believe in the ability of networking with somebody else or working with somebody else. So often we'll have groups, everybody wants to get with their friends. That's cool. But then we encourage them to kind of work with somebody, because in the real world, you might have to work with, and we talk about that too, you might have to work with somebody that you don't necessarily like or that you don't necessarily vibe with. So one of the things that we do in our program is when we do certain activities, we'll group them and we'll let them name the company or the team or whatever. And then we let them kind of govern themselves. They become self-governing. So, Sean, you're going to be the leader today. So you have the power to, not say necessarily discipline, but to address different issues. And if your team loses, if let's say somebody's not doing the work, then you can go to them and say, listen, I need you to do the work. I need you to do this. Or if they curse or they do something crazy or whatever, or they hit somebody, just stuff kids do, give them push-ups or give them, and the way it works is because it revolves. So you're the leader today, so you need to be a fair leader because tomorrow somebody else is going to be the leader and they can just do the same thing to you. And I kind of watched the interaction. But once it becomes, once they get familiar with that kind of structure, then they bounce ideas off of each other tremendously, and you just get excited to give them new problems or to give them new scenarios just to see what they'll come up with, and then kind of encourage it. So,
right. Well, we've covered a lot about it. So I think of you as being kind of like uniquely Mr. Atlanta. So like we're right now in your office in Midtown, but we're in Georgia, so you had that kind of concept of it. Do you agree with me that you kind of have like a unique kind of like glimpse of Atlanta versus like other people? Or
I couldn't take full credit for it. That's a compliment. I feel like my unique experience is just being open to meeting different people.
Well, I'm going to push even harder.
Go ahead.
Use this example. Like, we grew up with the notion that like, Woody Allen is the quintessential New York director, and he came up with this black and white film Manhattan. He made a film every year in that city, but like I'm asking, like, is he Mr. New York or is he Mr. Manhattan? Like that, it's like you have your unique.
Yes.
Like, so it's like there's the 5 boroughs in New York, and then in Atlanta we've got so many different types of cultures. It's like you can easily kind of just look at it from one direction and say like, oh, this is what it is, but it's evolving, and like so you necessarily have to be like conversant with all types of people, not just the kids, but also like the administration and different. Like I joke that it's like Blade. You have to be like a daywalker, and be able to speak with the vampires and the.
You definitely need to be versatile. You definitely need to be versatile. I've been called, a jack of all trades. You definitely need to be versatile. You definitely, it's all about perspective and understanding, and the willingness to understand. Like when you talk to administrators, when you talk to counselors, when you talk to just the different gatekeepers that could either help accelerate my goals and what I want to do, or hinder it to a degree in these, because everybody's not sold on me right away.
Sure, it's only natural.
It's only natural, but I look at that like run at it scared. Like I'm not like once I hit a brick wall, and I know, and I bring it back. I know like even the kids that are problem or difficult, those I know like if I can win them over, they'll be the best like proponent to getting this done. So as a day walker, yes, I have to wear, and then, my organization is not inherently like super large. So of course, I have people that have volunteered with me who have come on board that are focused on certain areas. But until that, it's always good to kind of know where you can focus on. But quotable, and I'm probably gonna say it wrong, but the warrior that's only guarded on one side is open to attack on all sides. Sure. So you have to kind of like, you might not be the most talkative person, but you can do it to a degree to where you can make that connection. You might not be the most, but your willingness to learn more and to connect more will push you in different directions. So yeah.
Encouraged, or have you met like what you saw as like, oh, this kid's like me when I was a kid. Like this is a little Steven.
Oh my gosh, definitely. And that's one of the things that you come across quite often. And they might not be you exactly, but they have certain elements that you can recognize in them.
Sure.
And that makes it, you become more responsible. Because you knew, like, when I was at that stage, even as adults, like we still have elements of our life that we would love for somebody to say, you know what, you remind me of me. Let me give you a piece of advice. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Those people are key. Like you remember your favorite teacher,
for sure.
You remember your favorite. You remember those people that gave you that push in the right, whether it was a positive moment or a negative moment, but it pushed you forward. That's very important. And when I see a kid who may not understand things about themselves at that time and why I'm like this or why I get these results, and you recognize why because you were like that, and you're able to say, listen, you're going to be great, man. Just focus on this and don't worry about that. That's huge. That's always huge. Going back to the beginning of the conversation, you don't need to know how to do everything. You don't need to be an expert in everything. People, they want you to be linear. We're not linear beings. It's things that we like to do. You're right-handed, but you need your left hand. Mm-hmm. So being able to transition and to have balance in that for what that looks like for you is something that's universal, and I don't think enough people give themselves credit for it. They once you say you're this in your head, or I'm not talkative, or because you have students or people in general that I'm not a friendly person or I'm not a social person. Well, you might not be in this setting, but it's a setting that you are considerably more social. You just haven't found it.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about, your seed might not grow in this field or at this time.
Yeah.
But it will in somewhere. You just haven't found it, and people stop looking.
Sure.
So I can just continue, and you don't vibe with everybody, but it's the opportunity to, and your willingness to, is what carries, because everybody wants to be understood. Everybody wants to connect with somebody that's doing something positive. So yeah, well, I'll say that.
Once again, I'm going to mention it that it's IAMCOLLEGE.org, and you can also find it the same extension, IAMCollege, on Instagram.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to plug, or is there
We do a lot of different programming, and it's still evolving. Feel free to contact me, Churn at IAMCollege.org or IAMCollegeNPO@gmail.com. So definitely reach out. We're always looking for volunteers and support. We're part of Amazon Smile program. We're part of Benevity. We're part of Kroger. So it's a lot of avenues to support us. And I want to say thank you, sir, for your time and just wanting to sit down with me and talk about
anytime
me, man. And I appreciate it. So yeah, man.
And I'm hoping you're good to hear more of Steven in the future.
All right.